Reading from the King Jimmy, this is Deuteronomy chapter 28, verses 43, 44, and 45. The Bible says this, "The stranger that is within thee, that is within your country, shall get up above thee very high, and thou shalt come down very low. He shall lend to thee, the foreigner, the stranger, the alien, he'll lend to thee, and thou shalt not lend to him. He shall be the head, and thou shalt be the tail." Verse 45 now, "Moreover, all these curses shall come upon thee," not blessings of liberty, not blessings of plurality. God recognizes these clearly as curses. "All these curses shall come upon thee, and shall pursue thee, and overtake thee, till thou be destroyed. Because," why? "Because thou hearkenedest not unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to keep his commandments and his statutes, which he commanded thee." Israel, in their covenant that they made with the Lord in Deuteronomy, the condition was that if they did not obey the word of the Lord and be careful to keep all of his statutes, that they would be cursed by God. And these curses were not just ethereal or spiritual. They were not merely 17th dimension curses. They were tangible, temporal. They were physical. They were literal. And one of these curses was that Israel, if they were unfaithful and neglected to obey the commandments of God, they would be overrun and conquered and taken over by foreigners. That foreigners would be in their midst. They would rule over them. That the foreigner would also be economically superior to them. It would not be their native brother or sister, but rather it would be a stranger and an alien who is now the money lender, who is lending to them with their loans and their mortgages for their homes. And they're not lending to the stranger, but the stranger is economically superior to them, lending to them. They would be above them and they would be beneath. That the foreigner would be the head, and Israel, the native population in their own country, would be the tail. All of these are curses, and they would come upon the nation of Israel if Israel was unfaithful to the Lord. I believe that this concept, this principle, although in many ways unique to Israel under the Old Covenant, that is the Israel of the Bible, not modern Netanyahu Israel today, but the Israel of the Bible under the Old Covenant, it was particular to them. But the general equity, that means that the general moral principle underlining this pattern, this concept, is true of any nation, especially nations that in their foundation, in their formation, in their history and heritage, were Christian nations. We have been a Christian nation. Many European Western nations were Christian nations. And as we have turned our back on the Lord and neglected to obey his commands, we are falling, I believe, under national covenantal curses. And one of those curses is foreigners ruling over us, not merely from some distant place, not from across the pond, but in our midst, that they would invade our nation, and from within our nation, they would rule over us economically, lending to us, and us borrowing from them. Politically, they're holding high office and dictating legislation and the rules of the land that we now have to follow. God, this is the point that I'm making, God clearly saw this as not a blessing of liberty, not, oh, this is great, we can fulfill the Great Commission now because the whole world, all the nations are coming to us. Nowhere in God's word did he say that these things will happen, and won't it be great? No, these things will happen, and clearly, obviously, it's a curse. God understood this as a curse, and Israel, God's people under the Old Covenant, understood this as a curse. And yet we're sitting here like seals, clapping about how much strength we now have because of our diversity, how open-minded we are, how progressive thinking we are. We think it's a blessing. We think it's a brag. We think that it's some characteristic of higher evolvement. This is insane. We are being conquered, and nobody forced us into this. Yes, some wicked politicians that we voted for, we are voting in voluntarily our own demise and giving the heritage of our fathers to foreigners instead of our children. This is a very, very wicked thing, and it does not matter if the politician in question is running as a Republican who's memorized the Declaration of Independence and wears a cowboy hat and a Texas flag shirt at his rodeo, photo ops, or if he's a blatant socialist in New York. In either case, if your name is Omar or Vivek or Zoran, you're not American. And you can be here and behave as a guest, but you cannot hold political office. You cannot rule over the native citizenry of this nation. Absolutely not. And any true red-blooded American who's celebrating these things or even passively sitting by and allowing these things to happen is a traitor to God and country. Let's tune in now. We're back, and some would say we're so back. I would be of the latter persuasion. It feels like so back. And today we are talking about being ruled by foreigners, which is, according to the Bible, clearly a curse. And we want to give you guys, you've probably seen many of the headlines, but we want to show some clips, a little bit of snippets from articles in regards to these three men. These are, just for the record, I was going to say, I don't want to pick on these three guys. I absolutely want to pick on them, but I just want it to be clear that in principle, there's so many more that I want to pick on too, and we just don't have simply the time in the day to do so. So we are picking on these three gentlemen, but not exclusively. There are many others who would fall into this category. I think of Ilhan Omar. Right. And these are people, just for the record, that by their own admission, when they refer to their nation of origin, they call it home. America's not their home by their own words. Right, Ilhan Omar, they speak of home being this distant foreign country. That's where their fidelity lies. That's where their allegiance lies. And just to be clear from the outset, we're not we are not critiquing that. We actually think that natural affections are a God-given thing. That it's good and right to have a special fidelity and place of affection in your heart for your place of ancestry, your people. However, it is retarded for us to say, let's make them our civil rulers, right? So the fact that Ilhan Omar loves Somalia more than America, which she does, is actually good and right. What's not good and right is that we made her a civil leader in our country. And that's wrong on, I would say, at least three bases. One, she is a foreigner. Two, she is a woman. And three, and most importantly, she is a Muslim. She's not a Christian. And so I would probably reverse that and say, no, you need to be a Christian. You also need to be a biblically qualified man to hold civil office. And then third, you need to be a heritage American. You need to be someone who on at least, I would define it like this, at least minimally on both sides of your family being able to track back 3 generations of being here in these United States, that your affection is here, your traditions are here, your people, your home is here, like Ruth, right? That the Bible has some category for immigrants. But, people always point to Ruth and say, well, Ruth, she was an immigrant. Yeah, but look at her heart, her disposition, and how she did it. She came in and said, your God will be my God. So right there's a forsaking of false religions and foreign gods. And your people will be my people. So I'm going to worship the God of Israel. I'm going to bind myself and assimilate to the people of Israel. And then she ruled as a queen. No, but her great-grandson, right? So Ruth marries Boaz. They have Obed. Obed begets Jesse, and Jesse begets David. So by the fourth, in her case, 4th generation, then you have someone fit as a man after God's own heart, who is a true Israelite of Israelites, right? He has, your God is my God. Your people are truly my people. I'm the fourth generation now, fully assimilated into Israel religiously, culturally, even ancestrally, at every single level. And he is fit in the sight of God, not only to be a king, but to be arguably the best king that Israel ever had. That's the way that it works. What we're doing today is nothing even close to it. Wes, what do you think?
Yeah. So the three men in the thumbnail, Vivek Ramaswamy, Omar Fatah, and Zohran Mamdani. It's kind of interesting because Vivek was the shot across the bow. This is literally Christmas Day, right? Us Americans, we're celebrating Christmas, the birth of Jesus Christ our Lord. We're a Christian nation. And that's the day that Vivek and many others went to X and started a big argument about H-1Bs and that their right to participate in our workforce, to have the right and the privilege to come to America and become Americans, whatever that means. That's a great thing. And if anything, we should encourage more of it. There's tons of talent out there. It should come to the United States. So that was Vivek. And that's only, guys, 7 months ago. We're in July. Right. It feels like a lifetime ago.
I know.
But that's 7 months ago. About 2 months ago, the name Zohran Mamdani came onto the scene. And that was by winning, I believe, the Democratic primary for the New York City mayor. So he's not been elected yet as mayor of New York City, but he's running against Eric Adams as the incumbent. And Andrew Cuomo as well as an independent, I believe, third party.
Just a quick rule of thumb. If Billy Bob in Kansas cannot pronounce your name, then you're not fit for office.
I was just about to say, Wes is crushing it over there with
the
tongue twister try.
I'm researching late at night,
you're
getting the inflection right.
A little foreign to me. I don't know. Uh-oh. Wes has to go back. I don't know where, but somewhere. Go ahead.
So you have, even Vivek. I think it's actually Vivek. I've heard it both. So
I've heard both.
Some character named V with a very Indian last name. You have a Muslim socialist.
I think it's pronounced Vivek.
Vivek was born in the United States. Zohran was not. He was born in Uganda in 1991. But the most recent one, and they're kind of building up on each other is my point. These have been 3 high-profile cases, and all across the nation, encouragingly, you're seeing outrage. The latest one is a individual, and it's kind of like a downhill gradient by the time we get to this guy, a Somalian man named Omar Fatah, and he's running to be mayor of Minneapolis. Minneapolis is home to the largest Somalian diaspora in the United States, so it's a hotbed of Somalians. He himself is already a senator in Minnesota. Now he's running to be the mayor of Minneapolis. I think it's the 40th biggest city in the United States. Not a small position. Same thing with New York. We're talking about a Democratic, Muslim, progressive socialist running to be mayor of, America's oldest city. And these have been high-profile cases, and you can see people beginning to connect the dots and say, okay, like Vivek, he's the one Republican on the Republican side of the aisle, whatever that means. He was kind of parroting, there is a God, there's 2 genders, we should work hard. But people are beginning to connect the dots and say, I'm not detecting that the affinity for America is really here. Let's play this
Hello,
clip.
fellow Americans.
Hello, fellow Americans.
I worship
this
the one true 3 million gods.
Right. Let's
Hinduism.
play this clip. This is Omar talking about Somalia to other Somalians. The very last one I sent.
All right, it's coming.
We should make dua for him and pray for him. I understand that our Somali communities are all connected to each other here in Minnesota and back home, and I ask for your support. There's always been a link between our community here as well as back home, and I'm running to bridge that gap and unite all of us and represent all of us, because when we succeed here, we succeed everywhere. And I'm hoping to do that just like Abdurazak, inshallah.
To build a link between our community here and the communities back home. I love it.
Asked for political donations from Somalia. 3 bags of rice arrived on his front doorstep.
Sir, you have 50% of our GDP. Here are 3 bags of rice. It's incredible and it's blatant. Listen to this story, because you could hear that and say, all right, here's a young man. One of the things he's campaigned on is making Minnesota livable. So he said, hey, I've got a young family and I'm campaigning on raising minimum wage, increasing mental health support, and just making the city more affordable to live. But you guys need to see what's actually happening in the city. This is from an individual that lives in the city. And they said this, and there's a lot of individuals who resonated with it. He said, I watched, quoting now, I watched as we were promised that it would be a small population, that is the Somalians. It was in 1990, there was a big humanitarian and refugee push to resettle them in Minnesota. I watched as we were promised that these Somalians would be a small population. Then it was just some humanitarian refugees. Now it's unrestricted mass chain migration. By chain migration, what he means is a family will arrive. So for example, Omar's family arrived sometime in the late 1960s as the first generation from Somalia. But what they did is then helped sponsor and get the visas for and the green cards and eventually the citizenship for other Somalian family members from Somalia. So a first generation comes in, they bring as many family as they can. Another 20 years go by, they're growing up, they're bringing as much family as possible to the United
Is
States.
that how that's like Ilhan marrying her brother?
That's exactly what it sounds like she did. She said, I'm married to this individual. And they're like, all right, well, we'll let your husband come in. Lo and behold, it's actually her brother. Continuing with this, Minneapolis is more than Little Mogadishu, but every day Little Mogadishu gets a little bit bigger. Now it's at the tipping point. It's also spreading. He says, I won't say which suburb was mine growing up, but the black folks who lived there got pushed out by the human wave of Somalis, all on government programs, even many of the whites as well. They're overwhelming the state and sucking it dry. So just in Minnesota, what they're doing is they're dragging and drawing all the resources from the rest of the state. They're overwhelming this state and sucking it dry. The only ones who work are the women. The men generally do not want to work because of their home culture, and so they will sit around and chew cat all day. The kids are forming gangs that put the Bloods to shame. The infamous crack stacks of yore are now dedicated headquarters of at least 2 Somali-based gangs. This isn't about a, quote, lack of resources or lack of education or lack of opportunities. Because these people are coached by government employees on what papers to sign, what words to say, and who to talk to in order to get every form of welfare, from food stamps to a free college education. My state is becoming Somalia. I do not care if you call me racist, if you unfollow, if you block me. I don't care. The DFL, that's the Democratic Farmers League, so it's a Democratic political action group that endorses candidates, saw that they could get an infinite voter base forever if they imported people beholden to the government for their existence. So I'll toss it back to you guys. But man, one of the big dynamics is give me free stuff.
Yeah.
We're affluent. We've been blessed by God. We are a Christian, Protestant, European nation with wealth the world can barely comprehend. And a lot of people want a piece of that.
Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, no, it's obviously the fault of having a welfare state to begin with. Obviously, there are a ton of problems with that. But especially when you immigrate to welfare,
Right.
it's like you've created a moral hazard for literally anyone who wants to come. Like you're inviting them to come, have to work their way up. But no, actually, it's fine if you're poor because we're going to take care of you. And so, it's just a terrible system. Kind of a little bit puzzling that anyone ever really thought it would work. You think like the mid 60s. But yeah, I think it's like these immigrant communities, they're coming to America. They're seeing immediately, I think, Wes, you've even talked about like envy. And the nature of envy when you're immediately brought in from a different land and you see affluence all around you. Like your instinct actually, sinful instinct, we should say, won't be, oh, let me emulate these people. It will actually be to a sense of injustice or unfairness. Right. And I think that's what a lot of immigrant communities experience in America. And so obviously what you get is this like, this sense of like, hey, let's actually protect one another, take what we can from them, so on and so forth. That's what we're reading here.
They think it's just infinite money. Like literally a lot of these people come in and they seem to think, well, minimum wage, we should just raise it. Well, where does that money come from? Money grows on trees. Like where does the money come from? From being productive.
Some of them think that because they're uneducated and maybe lower IQ. But I think there are plenty of people who are immigrants who don't actually think that. They don't care. Like I think there are plenty who know the money comes from us, but they don't care about us. They care about themselves, right? They're ultimately their loyalty lies with their own people, right? Everybody has an in group. It's been said before, and I think it's absolutely true that those of European heritage are pretty much European peoples are the only people group that are its own group's outgroup. Like we actually hate ourselves. And I wanted to point out, because I think there's a correlation. I don't think it's insignificant or random. But why Minnesota? And at this point, there's a critical mass kind of piece. There's a vicious cycle, a feedback loop where, well, there's already Somalians there. So, and eventually it just becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, I could see why Somalians at this point would want to go there, because there's a lot of other people like them, their own people. But why initially, right? I mean, there was a time, I know it feels like unbelievable at this point, but there was a time not that long ago to where there were not Somalians in Minnesota. And I can't help but think part of it, have you ever heard the old expression, Minnesota nice? Like, this is beyond, like before both Antonio and Wes's time probably, but I remember watching the cartoon when I was a kid, Bobby's World. Anybody in the chat, let me know if you remember Bobby's World. But Bobby's World, he's riding his little, big wheel, going back and forth and going through the halls. And his mom would, it's the Minnesota, stereotype, that has a lot of truth to it, as most stereotypes do. And she's like, oh, Bobby, don't you know, and like, and it's, I mean, like, they've done sketches of like people from Minnesota where they're trying to say, you're hosting someone in your house, and it's like they've been staying there, talking about the weather, and all these pleasantries, and just small talk and just politeness. And it's been like 7 hours, and it's like midnight, and you're like, they need to go, go home. And, like, you'll see like comedians even talk about it, and they're like, I'm on my third ope, and they still haven't left. And like, what do I do? Well, like, you could literally just say leave, but they literally can't, because politeness is like in their veins of, native heritage Minnesotans. And so it's like, well, don't you know, like, and that's how they act. Like, I mean, I can't imagine what they do at a four-way stop. I feel like everybody probably has their window rolled down, talking to the next. Oh, you go ahead now, don't you know?
Go.
Don't you know? Go ahead. Oh no, you go ahead. Oh no, how's the weather? And like, you could probably end up spending a year of your life at a four-way stop in Minnesota, because they're just, and what I'm saying is that, like, sure, respect and kindness, and these are Christian virtues, but kindness as a fruit of the Spirit, as a Christian virtue, we should recognize, is distinct from niceness. Niceness is not a fruit of the Spirit.
Yeah. Niceness
is not a Christian virtue. And there's a certain level where, like, kindness has given way to a self-deprecating, suicidal niceness that's actually, the reason why it's not a virtue is because it's not nice. So it's niceness to a stranger, but at the cost of your children. So that's actually not honorable. It's actually not virtuous. And so, like, when I think of, and granted, it's widespread at this point, like, you could point to just about any town on the map, and you'll see some foreigner holding some position of civil office. But Minnesota, and we're going to talk a little bit about New York in a moment. And I was thinking about those two places. Now, New York does not have that reputation of niceness, but I was thinking, why New York? And with Minnesota, I think it's kind of this bend over backwards, self-deprecating niceness in the case of Minnesota. In the case of New York, though, I think a big part of it is economically, you've got a lot of deracinated, upper level management, hedge fund managers, people on Wall Street, big money, that the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, as the scripture says, who love, lowering the bottom line, making, the big line go up more than they love their own grandchildren. And so then why is New York, have so much strength, so much diversity is our strength? I think in the case of New York, I think it's greed. And so, so Minnesota, I think it's this niceness, self-deprecating niceness. Which if we were to boil that down to a sin, a lot of it, what it's rooted in, the motivation would be the sin that is the fear of man. It's the fear of man, not wanting to offend because you care so much about what everybody thinks. Like, God forbid somebody think I'm rude, or not polite. And so there's a fear of man, I think, with the average Minnesotan. And then with the average New Yorker, I think there's a love of money. And I think those two things, I don't think it's a coincidence that there's we're overrun by foreigners everywhere, but those two seem to be hot spots. And I was trying to think of what are two particular sins in the native New Yorker and in the native Minnesotan that might have given way to being particularly overrun by foreigners. And I think that those two sins of a fear of man and a love of money, greed, seem to make sense. Do you guys have any pushback on that or anything you would add to it?
No, I think it's right that the kind of sort of kindness to a fault, or you could probably call it harmlessness, that's kind of embodied in the Minnesota Nice or the Canadian ethos too. Mm-hmm. I think it is actually sinful. I think it's like actually not. It's kind of subversive a little bit. It's like not. It's precisely not what it's supposed to be. It's not. I mean, obviously there are some people who are just genuinely like naive in that way, but I think a lot of times you can experience that kind of kindness and it seems a little inauthentic.
Contrived, yeah.
Yeah, contrived. So I think that's totally true. I was just one observation about New York, because you do hear it touted a lot as sort of like the most diverse, like I'm sure Zoran has said this before, like, oh, we pride ourselves on our strength. I'm just guessing. Just going to take a shot there. Flip of a coin in that he said that. But like the reality is in New York, it's like incredibly segregated. It's actually it's like for me a good case in point of immigration not really working. Like you certainly have different parts of the boroughs that are just totally segregated. Like, oh, this is like where Haitians live, and this is where like Chinatown is, and where you're gonna like. So to me, it's kind of like the prime example of everything that we don't want for a country. Like it's like precisely what causes nations to fail. So anyway, I just wanted to say that because I think that's a good point. A lot of people don't, come to that realization. Like, yeah, obviously New York sucks, but like why it sucks, it's precisely what its mayoral candidate is saying that he wants to further sort of broaden and lean into politically. So,
Yeah, and we have, just for the record, we have the rulers, the civil rulers that we deserve. So it's different than the communist, party of China, where it's like, nobody voted for this, and there's a lot of precious people, a lot of Christians actually in China at great risk and cost to their own lives and wish that they could do something about it and can't. But that's not really the case for us. In our case, it's like I mean, people will probably study it for centuries, just like we do Rome. Like, how could something so great ultimately fall? And if God chooses not to extend mercy, and it would be a mercy that we don't deserve, but if God allows us to simply, be given to our own vices, our own demise, and fall into the trap that we've laid for ourselves, America will end, at least America as we know it, and historians will look into it for centuries. Like, what in the world happened? They were so prosperous, a superpower of the world, and I feel like the correct conclusion would be. I think of A Mighty Fortress by Martin Luther, the famous hymn. There's a line where it says, "One little word shall fail him." And I feel like they'll be like, what happened to America? One little word shall fail her. What word? Racist. Mm-hmm. The world called her racist, and she folded like a cheap suit. She's, oh my goodness, racist. Well, then have my kids and my grandkids too, and please take my land. And oh, here's our ancestral farm. You can take that too. And at a certain point, you have to stop caring. You have to, and I'm not saying you have to stop caring about what the Lord cares for, caring for God, caring for country, and even caring for other parts of the world. I'm not talking about stop being compassionate. I mean, stop caring about what man thinks of you. It's the fear of man. It's the fear of man. We're slaves to the opinions of strangers. Who cares what the other side of the world thinks about us? It's like, well, they said death to America. Well, first and foremost, we could look into that and see maybe some of the motivation. Like, is it death to America because we worship the triune God? I think there's some of that. Is it also maybe death to America because with billions of dollars, we keep funding missiles that are being launched at them by our greatest ally? I think there's a little bit of that. But here's the big point for today's episode, to stay within context. Death to America. Yell the sand demons who worship sand gods 4,000 miles away. Who cares? I don't care what you think. I don't we need to be like that dude, the meme in the elevator. It's like, well, I think this and I don't think about you at all. I'm sorry. You're not my kin. You're not my family. You're not my countrymen. You're not even a fellow believer. You're not even a Christian. You're like, I don't care what you think. You think we're racist? Great. Who cares?
Minnesota is a great example of that. It was primarily settled by Northern Europeans, so Scandinavians, and then the vast majority of it being German. It was 98% white in 1960. So it was a European Christian. You had a lot of actually Dutch Reformed up there in the north. Now it's something in the 70%. And this is the last clip we'll play in the segment. But listen to what Omar Fatah says about whites who are the natives of Minnesota, the majority of Minnesota, the heritage of Minnesota. Take a listen to what he says about them.
We heard them being called terrorists. We heard them being called drug dealers. We heard a lot of insults. We heard that they're a threat to our national security. And that's a flat-out lie. You want to know who the real threat is, Madam President? I'll give you a hint. They don't look like our chief author. They don't look like the folks up in the gallery. They don't look like the folks out in the rotunda. They look like many of the members that sit in the front. And you don't have to take my word for it. According to DHS, Madam President, the greatest domestic threat facing the United States comes from, quote, racially or ethnically motivated violent extremists, specifically those who advocate for the superiority of the white race. Not our immigrants. We are safer and we're better off because of them.
Nope. Please leave. No, you don't get to come to our country and not just insult, but slanderously accuse the native population of a country that you did nothing to build. No, go home.
This analogy's been used before, but you can imagine like a kid walking in your house, walking into your kid's bedroom, and your kid tries to get him out, and he's like, he's a threat to my safety and my presence in this room.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane. That's you have to hear that for what it is. What he's saying is the greatest threat to America is Americans.
Right.
Heritage Americans, white European ancestry, America. The greatest threat to this country is the people, the posterity of those who built it, which is just like, I can't help but noticing. I don't know if you guys have noticed this too. It's we hate European countries, but we really want to live there.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like,
I will leave home.
Like all these people all over the world, talking about, the white man and how terrible he is, but also I'd really love for him to be my neighbor. Like, you pick a lane, make up your mind. Which one is it? Either white people are the scum of the earth and the bane of everyone's existence and a threat to all of humanity, in which case, why don't we leave them in their gated communities, with their nice, prosperous country and stay on the other side of the ocean? Or actually, white people have done something in the providence of God by his grace that we've never been able to accomplish, and we want a piece of it. But you got to, in which case we can respectfully say, no, thank you. But at least pick a lane. Say, white people are great. Can we please come? But right now, that's like we've lost the plot entirely. We're now at the part of the story where white people are terrible, and also I'm catching a flight and I'll be there, in about 12 hours.
We want your stuff.
It's crazy.
Like, that's insane. Like a foreigner coming in, you, the natives of this state and of this nation, existential threat. But we want the money. We want social programs. We want your government. We want everything you've set up. Mm-hmm. How do you lay down and take that? And I'm talking about the civic and the political ways of doing something about it, not talking about going outside of the law. But like how many, I think of Andrew Isker, who had to leave Minnesota. He'd been there for generations. And he said, it's impossible for me to live here with my family. And so for those that are staying, that are committed, like, well, there needs to come a moment where we stand up and we say something. That moment has been happening and is happening right now.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I would just say too, like, to address the question in the thumbnail, like why are we letting this happen? I think part of it is an indictment of the people. I mean, we talked about kindness and sort of that thing as kindness is sort of as an idol in a sense, or as at minimum a sin.
niceness. Yeah, it's a pseudo kindness.
Yeah.
It's not real
Yeah,
kindness.
right. And I think like part of it is like part of the answer to the question is because I think that it has to be you hate yourself.
Yes.
Like I mean, these are like and to some extent we're talking about Omar's sort of population base being people who don't celebrate the 4th of July.
Right.
Like they have bought this lie fundamentally that like America actually is wicked and that they have I mean we talk Matt Walsh's Am I Racist? Like some of these people are just like pathological really with self-hatred.
Yeah.
And so in one sense, in that sense specifically, it's much more complex in terms of the political and social forces at work here. But like in the micro, like there is a lot of sin going on to hate yourself that much, to allow yourself to be ruled.
Right. And I think part of that, so self-hatred for Western countries is incredibly real. But getting beneath that a little bit and speculating about some of the reasons why, part of it is guilt, a guilty conscience. I've talked about this in the past, even with like around in the month of October around Halloween, and maybe we do a special episode on the phenomenon of Halloween. Some of the roots of it are actually some of them are demonic, and then some of them are actually good. There's some Christian roots. And we can parse that out, for parents, like, do we do Halloween or not? And if we do, is there a Christian tradition and a way to observe it, righteously? And is there a Protestant way, or is it only Catholic? And those are all helpful things, important things to talk about. But the modern phenomenon of Halloween, I don't know about you guys, but like in my neighborhood, Halloween has now gotten to the point, have you noticed, it kind of gives Christmas a run for its money in terms of decorations. Like there is, I think, comparable. Like used to, it's like a couple people put up some bats and some cobwebs or something like that, or a scarecrow, in their front yard in the month of October, but everybody has Christmas lights, right? We're Americans, gosh darn it, we celebrate Christmas. Now it's kind of almost like a 1-for-1 ratio. And I noticed it's not the same houses. It's not just like, well, this house, this family just loves decorating. So any excuse that they could possibly have, like, I mean, they're decorating for, St. Patrick's Day. They're decorating, any holiday they could possibly come up with, any excuse to, put up some decorations. No, it tends to be different houses. So it's like, all right, you got this, row of houses that are celebrating and they're decorating for Christmas, and this other one. And a big part of it I've noticed is if you're trying to find the distinguishing factor, it's families versus perpetuated adolescents, right? Yeah. Young adults who are single and childless. The young adults who are single and childless, Halloween is kind of like the childless holiday for young, immature adults, because Christmas is very much family centric, right? You're giving gifts to one another, whereas Halloween is the holiday where it's an excuse for women to dress like whores in their little, skimpy cat suits and get drunk and go sleep around, and so like Halloween is like Friendsgiving, it's the singles, the poor man's holiday, the single, the single loser who hasn't grown up, their holiday, and that's, at least that's certainly what it's become, and I think of that and think of just how horror, right? So that's Halloween, and then all the horror movies that come out. And horror is actually, in cinema, it's become like the leading grossing genre of film. More people turn out for horror films than ever before. And now it's not just the month of Halloween, but it's year round. It's just thriller.
The giant skeletons
thriller.
are up at Costco. I'm not even kidding.
Already.
It is July.
No, I know.
And they're up.
My son, he calls them gorillas because he's 2. He can't pronounce skeletons. So he's like, the skeleton, gorilla. And so we're going through, the other day, it was like about half an hour. And I was like, what is he talking about? I had no idea what he was talking about.
That wasn't even the worst sight at Costco.
And then he finally pointed when we went by, and I was like, okay, all right, skeleton, But anyways, the point is, so the film industry, now year round with horror movies, and the whole point that I'm building up to is this: why do you subject yourself to the edge of your seat like this? The type of movie. It's one thing when it's a good mystery. It's another when it's like Saw, 17 or whatever they're on now. It's just chopping off limbs. It's just bloody, shameless gore. And it's like, why do people give money voluntarily and they pay for it? like, is it really enjoyable? Like, I don't really think it is. And part of it, you could say we're desensitized, we're degenerate. But part of it also is, I think it's a voluntarily subjecting yourself to some measure of virtual pain because you know that you're guilty. And there's some Christian guys who have written on this. So this is an original concept to me, but I think there's something to it, that like the phenomenon of the horror industry becoming so popular. I think part of it is because you have a degenerate populace that is apostatized from the Lord, turned their back on Christ, that are not obedient to his commands, like we read in Deuteronomy chapter 28, and they know that they deserve to be punished, but none of them actually have the courage or they don't have the will to repent or the courage to subject themselves to the true wrath of God. So they go into, the movie house, they go into the haunted house and come out and having watched, this is kind of the language that one Christian used, having watched in a virtual kind of pseudo fashion, someone else has now died in their place. Someone else has now atoned for their grievances, right? They know they're guilty, and so they're kind of like, it's almost like this sadistic, or masochistic, self-punishment. And I think that when it comes to immigration and some of the things in the West, it's a similar concept. It's this idea of like, so we know that there's this self-loathing, this suicidal instinct that's completely unnatural. And it's like, what would drive a populace to be like that? And I think it's a self-hating people is a guilty people. And rather than choosing repentance and turning to the Lord for atonement for our sins, we're basically, instead of repentance, we've chosen penance. Instead of repentance, we've chosen penance. And so what we've done as a society is we say, well, we know we're guilty because we have all this opulence and all this blessing, and we've turned our backs on the source, right? Every good and perfect gift comes down from the Father of lights. We know that the source of this is God, but we don't want him. So we've turned our back on him, and yet we still have this blessing. And so we struggle to sleep at night. And now all of a sudden we all have these mental disorders, and you're schizophrenic and you're bipolar, and a million of you have, depression, and the other million have, anxiety. And so we're self-medicating, we're treating all of our mental disorders and psychotic, episodes, all the while knowing that the real problem is our guilt. And we know that we should be punished because we're this incredibly opulent, blessed, prosperous people who have turned our back on the Father of lights, from whom every good and perfect gift comes. And so instead of turning to him, that would be one solution. One solution to guilt is gratitude and turning to the Lord in repentance and recognizing him and pledging our fidelity back to him, renewing the covenant. The other solution is, well, if we don't want God, but we also feel terrible because we know that we're a guilty people, well, it's like almost like a Robin Hood syndrome. I'll console myself, assuage my conscience for my theft by at least giving a portion of what I've stolen away. Mm-hmm. So I can go on stealing so long as I at least benefit some others and not only myself with my stealing. And I think this is at every level, the spiritual level, religious level, apostatizing from Christianity in the West, but then even at economic levels. It's like we know, right? Billionaires, because who are the people who are lobbying and getting these kinds of people, elected? These foreigners well, it's the people who they know they're guilty. They've made dollars off of pennies by unethical means, by squeezing out men's wages and this and that and the other. And so it's like, how do you sleep at night? Well, the way I sleep at night is I console myself as I'm flying in my personal jet by telling myself but at least there's, this many hundreds of, Indians that I've employed with H-1B visas. Yeah. And here we are.
The big facilitators of resettlement to Minnesota have been Lutheran charity services and Catholic NGOs that helped a lot of them get there, to get settled, fill out the paperwork, bring family members, Christian in quotes, Christian groups, ostensibly.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
We should do our first commercial here.
First commercial break, and we'll be right back.
All right. Hello, brothers in Christ. Let me ask you something real. Are you truly protecting and providing for your wife and children, not just in this life, but the one to come? Here's a reality check. only 45% of adults in America have life insurance, and of those, nearly 2/3 are underinsured. That's not good stewardship. And as Christian husbands and fathers, we're called to do better. But what if you could protect your family's future and wisely grow your wealth right now? That's where private family banking comes in. It's a proven strategy that allows you to leverage your existing cash flow, build tax-free legacy wealth, and give your family lasting security, all while aligning with your biblical call to provide and protect. This is what it looks like to turn post-mill talk into post-mill action. Tap the link in the show notes to book your free discovery call and take your next step toward financial discipleship and multi-generational impact. In the future, it may be hard to persuade people that what happened starting in the spring of 2020 really did happen. A fake pandemic was the signal that one morning began the foreclosure on everything that had, until the evening before, been central to the idea of democratic constitutional republics. The most shocking thing was not so much that this started to happen, but that almost no one seemed to object to it happening. Almost no one sought to defend the rights and liberties being overturned. Leftists clamored for more and more tyranny, while most conservatives fell silent. In this book, The Abolition of Reality, Irish dissident leader John Waters describes not merely what happened, but the meaning of what happened, in what may well be judged by history as the most heinous crime of all time. This book, as Winston in 1984 said, is for the future for the unborn. Get it from Western Front Books at the link below. That's www.westernfrontbooks.com. Again, that's www.westernfrontbooks.com. Looking for a God-honoring courtship for your young adult? Introducing CovenantMatches.com, the exclusive, biblically grounded matchmaking platform for Trinitarian Christians who value purity, tradition, and parental guidance. No woke ideologies, no LGBTQ influence, just serious believers from approved states like Florida, Texas, and Tennessee, and soon vetted international members from nations like the Philippines, Mexico, and Poland. Parents and guardians, you're in control. Create profiles for your sons and daughters 18 years or older. Oversee the courtship process, and let our AI-generated avatars maintain modesty for you. No worldly dating app photos on this site. We uphold the statement of faith. Only Trinitarian Christians need apply. This is for those seeking true biblical courtship, not modern dating chaos. Launching in 20 states with international expansion coming soon. Secure your family's future with CovenantMatches.com, where faith, tradition, and parental wisdom lead the way. Visit CovenantMatches.com today, because godly marriages start with godly foundations. Again, that's CovenantMatches.com. Hello, brothers in Christ. Let me ask you something real. Are you truly protecting and providing for your wife? We are back. Okay. We were looking at each other and we're like, a fourth commercial. That's shameless. So I'm glad.
We didn't have it in us.
I was going to say it ain't so. It's not so. Okay.
So first segment, we talked about Minnesota, and that's been the case that definitely a lot of people have been talked about. We haven't spent a full episode, though, talking about Zoran Mamdani. If he succeeds in the mayor election, which last I checked, he was polling at about a 70% likelihood to win, New York City will have a Democratic Socialist Muslim mayor. Right. This is the city that it's less than 100 years ago. You can see pictures of the Empire State Building lit up with the crosses for Easter. And we're now looking at probably a Muslim socialist. And you would think at least like, okay, so Muslim, so he's going to be, at least not a feminist and at least not pro-LGBTQ, right? Well, he's there marching at New York City Pride. So even the Muslims we get are gay. This is the worst. I swear it's like even the Muslims are pro-LGBTQ and you're like, can I catch a break? Mm-hmm. But here's the reason that he mattered. After the 2024 election, one of the questions was, where does the Democratic Party pivot? Kamala Harris did not connect with voters. That was the story for months. She didn't connect with people. She was too aloof. Same thing with Tim Walz. The dude was just weird. And so kind of the sense was, are they going to be able to find someone that will actually get young people excited to vote for them? And I regret to inform you, if you're not thinking, oh, he's a socialist, he's a Muslim, he doesn't have a chance. He actually is decently engaging. And one of the ways that he connects with people is he'll go to a shop, whether it be a little taco shop or a kebab shop, ask them about the difficulty that they've had getting permits from the city, asking them about cost of living and about rent, and making promises that appeal practically to people on the ground in New York City. And that's been a lot of his voter base, is Gen Z, is individuals that are working class. This is kind of what you had in the Democratic Party of the past, when they were not quite so as embracing of more radical ideologies. They were much more of a workers' party. Well, Mamdani represents kind of a return to that. And we're just going to play a short video from him where you can kind of see his punchy New York style and maybe get a sense of why it's connecting with people.
Being a politician means listening, not just to your supporters, but your critics too. And some of these critics, especially on a certain website, have been giving me consistent advice. For example, at SamWhite087, Zoran, go back to Uganda, where you come from and belong. At Teflon Gone, loser, go back to Africa. There are thousands like this from across the country. I hear you. And I agree. I'm going back to Uganda. I'm headed there in a personal capacity to celebrate Rama and I's marriage with our family and friends. But I do want to apologize to the haters, because I will be coming back. And since you will undoubtedly read about this trip in the New York Post, inshallah on the front page, here are a few of my humble suggestions for headlines. MIA, Mamdani in Africa. Uganda miss me. He's completely crazy. He can't be serious. Carl Kampala-Neely investigates Mamdani. Zoe running away.
Yeah, he just like leaned right into it, and that helps. I think when you demonstrate that kind of self-awareness, bring a little humor and levity, which I think the Democratic Party has struggled with for ages now at this point. Meme culture famously, like they just don't understand what it means to like connect through humor.
Right.
You can see why he is so formidable, because he demonstrates even in that clip a little bit like self-effacing, kind of like, realism of like who your critics are. He's not like, he knows that people want him to go back. It's not like he's like straw manning an opponent. He knows who the people who oppose him are and what they think about him. And I mean, you can see the appeal for sure.
Yeah.
Americans have to get into their system. Daryl Cooper, he's talked a lot about this. One of the reasons that we've been so welcoming as a nation in the past, like you think of the 1790 Immigration Act, was free white persons of good moral character. Now, that sounds very restrictive to us today, but in that time, that was wide open. It was basically saying any European of good moral character can come here. Well, part of the reason was we had a huge continent to fill with people. And so for 150 years, we were very much so, anyone can come in, right? The Irish were coming in. They weren't getting along great. Shipped them out to the Midwest. The Italians, the Spanish, like there were a lot of different groups coming here. And we always had this kind of punchy attitude about us. So Alexis de Tocqueville, his very famous book, Democracy in America, he's a French aristocrat that came to observe and to write back about what he observed in America. Even him at the time, he observed that the American sailors were far more reckless. They'd go out on way rougher seas. We've always had this punchy attitude about us and also been generally more welcoming. And all of those things, I think at the time, were good. It's good to fill the nation with people that are going to settle it, to work hard, to be productive, and to be industrious. I love the American spirit. I grew up, even to my son, we read the stories of John Henry, the steel driving man who he beats the steam engine, right? And I'm reading in the story about that will of like, I'm not going to be beat by a machine. I'm going to work hard and I'm going to outdo it. I think those are some of the best parts about America. But those don't work so well in 2025 in a globalist world where it's foreigners coming in and they're co-opting those same aphorisms, those same attitude of the past. They're saying, I'm just like you, I'm quirky, and hey, we're all Americans and in this, right? I think all of a sudden it's now time for us to turn and say, all right, we've settled. We are younger, to be fair, than European nations. There's a reason Europe it's called the old world, and we're called the new world. We're younger, but we're hitting 250 years. And so it's time to say, yeah, in our first 250 years, we were punchy. We punched above our weight class. We were productive. We were in many ways welcoming. But that's just not working for us now. And so we can say, yeah, America was welcoming for a time. And at this point, we're full. Yeah, we were the scrappy underdog once upon a time. Now, We have the biggest GDP in the world, and it's not because we have the most people. China has 5 times as many people, I think, and a smaller GDP. We're the biggest, we're the best, we have a lot of opulence, and we're full except for the right people.
Yeah. And you can imagine why it's so confusing. I think, like, we talk about, like, to your point, the founding, the revolution was all about just being these ragtag sort of upstarts, not really knowing what they're doing, predominantly younger, inexperienced. You think of Madison, you think of Hamilton, and these guys, like, and that actually is the appeal in our mythology as Americans, is like, wow, okay, we're up and comers, we're upstarts, we're rugged. You think about, like, George Washington, famously an American aristocrat, but he was still rugged as far as European aristocrats went. He still rode horses. He engaged in a little bit more sort of rough and tumble sports and athletics and those sorts of things, engaging in sort of exploration of the frontier, so on and so forth. So it's like it's kind of difficult to hold those two things together, and I think that's what a lot of Americans struggle with, is like, I do actually have a righteous appeal to the underdog as an American. That is what I'm taught through our stories and through our myths to sort of be drawn to. But at the same time, when you have people who aren't yours, who don't originate from your fathers,
they're
and so
co-opting it as a play.
Right, exactly. It's like, well, how can I? What is the lens through which I can actually tell those two things apart?
Right.
And I would just say, can you pronounce their name or not?
Was there any Zoran on the Civil War battlefield? Can we look and find a tombstone or something like that?
It's fun. Doesn't he actually, like, physically look a little bit like the Adam Sandler character from the Zohan? Right? Like, he actually looks like the hair, everything. I'm like, is this, I don't know. I feel like, am I being punked? Is this a skit?
Right.
It's real life.
Let's talk practical. We were talking before the episode about natural rights and civil rights, and we're going to try to have hopefully Stephen Wolfe on the show a little bit later this week to talk about a great article that he had, which was a Christian defense of inequality. And there's a distinction between our rights and our value as human beings, being made in the image of God, versus, for example, natural or civic and societal rights that we have. For example, we all agree that felons shouldn't have the right to vote. You, by your conduct, have forfeited your participation in civil representation.
Right, which means it's not a natural right. It's not inherent.
Now, here's the question. We have individuals. Let's take Omar Fatah. He was born here, to be fair. He was born in America. He was born in D.C. I think he owns a home. He's worked in some capacity. He's worked.
It's a shame that he was born here. Shouldn't have happened.
Not great. Not great. But here's the problem. We have millions of people that were born here. The Bible has a set of ethics. How do you deal with people that are here, but they're trying to pillage your system? They're trying to extract the wealth from it. They're calling whites an existential threat. And probably what that means is, more immigrants and moving more of their family here. How do you, in one sense, say, this isn't about personal hate for you. This isn't, of course, about pushing genocide. But you maybe can't live here anymore. You can't have these rights. Where do we define, for example, property? Like, could you say, I'm sorry, for example, boomers sold you their house and you felt like you could move here and you could own land, but you're here and you're being destructive. You have to go back. You can't own land here. What do we navigate with that?
Yeah, and I think it's particularly challenging because you're talking about you have a tendency to conflate macro and micro, right? So on a micro level, I would argue through natural rights down through civic rights and social rights, for me to take another man's property, that I would consider that unjust. If a man has a phone, if he has a car, for me to just hop in and say, hey, you're not welcome here, and so this thing is mine, I would consider that unjust at the micro level. The challenge becomes when you, at the macro level, you've had, on one hand, subversive policy with respect to immigration, with respect to, even allowing non-American citizens to own land. So you have those kinds of policies that have kind of subverted the legal system and our sense of justice here. But then you've also had, like you say, boomers and whatnot, like engaging in free and fair contracts to like sell their property. I think it becomes really difficult to parse those two things out.
Yeah,
I do think like we should consider as Americans who are like justice, with justice, trying to like solve this issue. We should think about like what kinds of precedents we set. I think that's something that we should consider, like what are the principles and where are we going to draw the lines with respect to like who gets to stay here, what property do we recognize, so on and so forth. And I think that's just work that's cut out for us. The good news is that's part part B of the problem. Part A is to stop the flood of immigration into our country. And I think most people, in MAGA movement and right of the MAGA movement obviously agree with that. And so once we have that, really we're talking about, okay, now what do you do with people who like actually have American citizenship and they own property, so on and so forth. I'll just quickly say this and I'll pass it to you, Joel, if you want to speak to this. But I do think that like an easy and pragmatic solution is to compensate people. We were talking about this before the episode. Like, I think you can say, hey, a boomer sold you their house. That's your house, like legally. We'll pay you for it and allow you to leave. And at least we give them like just remuneration, and then they now with a clean conscience, both them and us can leave with no envy, no jealousy, animosity. Or
don't resentment. They do that like with if the state or the city is going to be building like
it's eminent domain
highway?
Yeah, eminent domain.
If the people say, I'm sorry, we're not going to sell, do they have to just sit there with their hands tied, or are they able to say, no, we need
they can
the
take
highway,
it.
And so we're going to take it, but we're going to compensate you.
Yeah.
Yep. So America as a whole is building a highway, and the highway is called "Let's Stop Having a Bunch of Foreigners." It's called "We Want Our Country Back" highway. It's a "By God We'll Have Our Home Again" highway. Like it go by many names, and so yes, you're losing your property. We're going to compensate you fairly at market price, but no, you can't be here because you're not American.
Yeah.
Oh, but I'm an American citizen. Yeah. For 15 minutes? That doesn't make you American.
And you could encourage it with policy. Hey, you could stay here. We're not going to force you. But for example, you wouldn't have the right to vote or run for office. You weren't born here. You can't participate in civic life. Like I would be okay with, I was not born in Texas. I would be okay with the state of Texas saying, the only individuals that will vote in a Texas election for the representatives, for the governor, for the senators that represent them at the federal level, they will have been males born in Texas. Yep. And I would not get to vote. And I would be okay with that. Because I would know my state was moving towards electing better men, better Christians, better.
And in time, your children would be invited into that, right?
Exactly. If we stayed here.
Exactly. It goes for first generation, but then eventually, as time goes on, latter generations become native, because assimilation does happen, but it doesn't happen in one generation. It doesn't happen in one lifetime. It happens over generations, over time. And you think like I can imagine just, to play the devil's advocate, the detractor saying, well, that's not constitutional, or that's, those aren't the principles of the founders. And one of the things that I think we have to remember is, yes, like precedent matters, and we do want to hold to heritage and history as much as we can, especially from our fathers. Many of them were better men than we are. Maybe not Thomas Jefferson, but but there's Andrew Jacksons and Adams, and there's some that there's many, and George Washington that were great. However, even those guys, nobody is thinking or planning or strategizing or writing in a vacuum. Everybody's a product of place and time. We're not the omnipotent. We're not infinite, right? We're finite creatures, and so we're all products of providence. We're all products of providence. And so when you think, okay, like I'm one of the founding fathers of a nation, okay, well, what kind of nation is it? Well, it's a geographically speaking, it is a massive landmass where there's some indigenous peoples here, but very few. They're virtually all nomadic, right? So they they say it's their land, and you ask like which parts of it, and they're like, from over here all the way to over here. It's like, okay, and what have you developed? Like what are the
sea to shining sea?
From sea to shining sea, it's all our land. It's like, okay, great. Like what are the markers? Like how have you developed it? How have you? I mean, even a dog, will at least take the time to pee on a tree, to say like this is my backyard, But like you look at the indigenous people, and it's like, well, my great grandfather told me, once upon a time that he made a trip over here. It's like, did he build anything? No, he lived in a tent, and so it's like, all right, I'm sorry, but no. So there's a difference between immigrants and settlers. That's my first point. The founders, these were, even before that, the 13 colonies, these were settlers, not immigrants. They were actually settling something that was entirely unsettled. It was entirely unsettled. There was very few people here, and the people who were here had not settled anything. And so you have people settling. And so my point is this: if you're one of the founders in your early, you're America, 1.0, and the early phase of this building, then then you're probably looking at like, well, I have a brother-in-law who currently lives in England, but who's planning to move here, and we think that he would be an excellent statesman because we need a mayor over this particular colony and you want to leave room for that because that person who's coming is like, I mean, they're directly related to you. They're and so it's like, this is my family member who's coming here, and I've been here for 6 months, and he'll have been here 6 months shorter than me. So like, what's the difference? It seems petty, but that's not the country that we currently have today. We just, at some point, we have to acknowledge that things have changed. Things have changed. That's not our country now is a quarter of a millennia old. It has families that have been here for 10 plus generations. It's completely settled. It's not. We're not talking about a native nomadic people living in tents. It's a settled country with laws and history and rituals and traditions and infrastructure and buildings and civil affairs and all these different things. So a settled country with people who have been here for a very long time, and maybe now might be a good time to reevaluate and say, oh yeah, like it's one thing if nobody had been here longer than if everybody's first generation is my point, then okay, then maybe we don't draw the line here. But if you're looking now and saying, okay, but about 50, 60% of the country has been here for generations and generations and generations and has a stake in the country's history and its past, then yeah, that's probably the group that we should look at when it comes to political leaders. Right? And not Omar's Zakamara. Like that's
potentially one of our biggest flaws in America is we require the president to be a natural born citizen.
Right.
Like Arnold Schwarzenegger, born in Austria, he couldn't be the president. But virtually no other public office that requirement is a part of. Same thing with religious tests of office. Early on, of course, that was much more aimed at making sure that, for example, a Catholic church or a Protestant church or Anglican or Presbyterian weren't able to come in and say, well, you have to be Presbyterian as part of a religious power play. Mm-hmm. But 250 years later, like I think of No Country for Old Men. If the system you followed got you here, of what use is the system? Now, that's not saying in all time the system was useless. But if you're following the system and a socialist Muslim who's pro-LGBTQ somehow, try to figure that one out. If he's about to be your mayor, well, we have our system. We have the Constitution.
Well, just for the record, he's pro, LGBT LMNOP mafia. Just for the record, we know why. Because he won't get elected without it. Like at the end of the day, we're not a nation of laws. We're a nation of political will. Mm-hmm. And the people are very much still in charge. And what that tells me is he knows exactly what the people will tolerate and what they won't. Will they tolerate being led by a foreigner? Yeah. Will they tolerate a Muslim who worships false gods? Yes. Will they tolerate someone who doesn't support openly sodomy? No. Like if we had the same zeal for the Lord Jesus Christ as we do for butt sex, then he wouldn't even run. Or who knows, he may have actually converted to Christianity and then tried to run. He converted on the alleged values that he knew were non-negotiables for the American people. And when it comes to New York, what are the values that they won't budge on? Sodomy. Not Christianity, but sodomy. And so he acquiesced to sodomy because that's the will of the people. But it's a great point that you're making, Wes, and just it's basically kind of I don't want to sound like the Tim Keller third way here, but kind of a little bit of you don't just have two choices of saying the founders were right about everything and we can't change a thing, or right, that's option one. Option two is the founders were dumb and not worthy of respect, and we should change it all. Here's the third option. I don't think you have to do either of those two. The third option is these were brilliant men. Mm-hmm. And what they came up with, it's not that, oh, wow, they actually had some really bad ideas. No, they were great ideas. But most great ideas are timely ideas and not timeless ideas. There are many great ideas that are great for a decade, for a century, but very few ideas are great forever.
Yeah. And I would just say, like, to your point, I'll defend the Constitution a bit here in the sense that the Constitution, in terms of its letter of the law, the rationale behind it is actually outlined by Madison and Hamilton in the Federalist Papers. And in that, I would say that is actually a timeless work because it's a work of political and moral philosophy. They talk about why the structure of a government, as you exhibit in the Constitution, is good, why balance of powers and those sorts of things make sense. And I think Hamilton would actually admit that the letter of the law of the Constitution was timely. Like, I think he would assent to that.
Yeah, I think
he would say that the principles behind it are timeless and meaningful.
Just like the Bible. That's what general equity theonomy is. It's saying that the general, universal, transcendent principles, moral principles undergirding all this civil code, that's timeless, right? So a parapet around the roof of your house.
Yep.
Okay, well, if you're not sleeping on the roof because now we've invented HVAC, then you don't have to have a parapet around the roof of your house because nobody's on the roof of your house. That's silly. But the general equity, the universal undergirding moral principle is, hey, let's not be negligent and careless when it comes to preserving and defending and esteeming the sanctity of human life.
Yeah.
And that of course we still hold to. So now it's not parapets, border around the roof of your house. Now it's seatbelts in a car, or speed limits on the road. But we actually are still holding to that general principle. And so I don't think there's any general undergirding universal moral principle in the Constitution that I wouldn't still hold to. I think there are some latter amendments that need to be revisited, to put it charitably. But the first 10 amendments, if we get back to authorial intent, and then the Constitution as a whole, setting aside some of those latter amendments, I think the spirit of the law is true and good and right. And I would just simply like to get back to authorial intent, revisit some of the latter amendments, maybe adopt, the Nicene Creed or Apostles' Creed as a preamble to the Constitution, and then uphold the spirit of the law and not be a Pharisee. That's literally what the Pharisees did, was they got so meticulous and tedious. They were all lawyers. They were lawyers. And they were unethical lawyers. Now I'm being redundant, but like they were lawyers, and they were using the letter of the law to ironically and hypocritically is really the word, undo the whole spirit and purpose of the law to begin with. And that's where we are.
Yeah, and like, to make a concrete example of like what that looks like, Wes brought up, not allowing someone born outside of the United States to become the commander-in-chief. And I use that word intentionally because as a pragmatic and timely manner, the commander-in-chief was the head of the executive branch, and he had control of the military. Mm-hmm. And you're at a time where you still have hostilities with Britain. In fact, we would go to war with Britain 30 years, 20 years after the revolution was fought and ended. Right. And so there was a legitimate concern, timely concern, not to have your commander-in-chief be, for example, of British origin.
Right. Because what if he secretly was loyal to them?
Exactly. And
Tories his own natural affections.
Yeah, Tories were a notorious
America.
problem even after the revolution. Right. People who remained loyal to the British crown, and there was a lot of discrimination there. But here's the thing: they could not have imagined. Like you would say, "Hey, Hamilton, why didn't you make representatives have to be born in America?" He's like, there's no way that there's ever a meaningful amount of foreign-born representatives to ever make a difference. Now, for the commander-in-chief, that would matter because he has a lot of centralized control. But for Congress, it's okay.
Right. That's what he was saying.
He was wrong.
He was wrong.
and
that doesn't mean he's dumb. Yeah. It means America has changed.
It's actually, the principle is protect your nation from foreign hostility vis-a-vis the law, barring people who aren't from here and don't originate from this lineage and custom and tradition, so on and so forth. That's the principle that ought to be enacted. And I'll just say this about Hamilton and Washington too, and you read his farewell address, it becomes evident that they wouldn't actually, the sin that we've committed isn't our steadfast commitment to the Constitution, to our demise. It actually is, and they would be truly dismayed at this, that we did not exert our political will. Because that's the thing the founders time and time again prided themselves in and thought was the most American, was to say, at all costs, we will defend the honor of our nation and our family and our prosperity and our posterity. And that's something we just simply haven't done for over a century now.
Yeah.
And my system, just if you were going to say, what's the minimal case, right? Not getting rid of the Constitution or anything. Article 6, religious tests for office. The 19th Amendment, revising the 19th Amendment to not allow women to vote and say men of good moral character having resided in these United States for 3 generations.
Yes. That's beautiful.
That's the two of them. Religious test for office. Professing the Christian faith. Just teensy little 5-6 little
Not
words.
bad. Yep.
Men must be men of good moral character. Oh, maybe landowning, residing in the United States.
Yeah.
And
Those two things.
and then some
close
of
the
it
borders.
again is getting to authorial intent. So it's like
That's not all you would need to do,
So it's
but-
not just like, hey, these pieces need to be amended. These other pieces need to be observed. So like the 14th Amendment, for instance, I would look at the 14th Amendment and I say, no, this is not the door cracked open for the Civil Rights Act. So let's get rid of that. But if anything, the 14th Amendment used rightly would say, let's stop abortion.
Right? Equal protection.
Equal protection for, you can't have an unprotected class such as every unborn child, right? It's open season. It's purge season. Can you imagine if you did that with any other people? If you did that with black people, or you did that with Hispanics, or you did like, hey, you know what? With this group of people, you can harm them or kill them with impunity. So I would say, yeah, let's actually abide by the 14th Amendment. And the 14th Amendment and its authorial intent doesn't actually carve out Civil Rights Act to where you no longer have freedom of association. Freedom of association might be a wrong decision in some cases, but it is your decision. You
Right.
want to have the
I want men's only gyms, I'll tell you what.
Exactly. No, seriously. But let's say, like to make it, you get in there and you make this about race, but to make it like, if you want to have the whites only pancake house, well, enter at your own risk, and you might go bankrupt in a month, or you might sell more pancakes than anybody's ever imagined. Who knows? But I actually
Don't launch in Atlanta,
But that
I
should,
would say.
but yeah, don't open in Atlanta. But that should be your right. The government shouldn't be controlling that as law. That's that's not a legal issue. So anyways, with the 14th Amendment, like that opening the door for the Civil Rights Act and freedom of association, all that kind of. But here's the thing, agreeing with your point, Wes, I'm not sitting here saying, so let's get rid of the 14th Amendment. I'm saying, why are we not using the 14th Amendment in the ways that it actually would apply? Not with St. George Floyd, but what about with the 70 million babies who were euthanized in
Right.
their mother's womb? Like let's actually use, so some of it would be like, yeah, that needs to be amended. But a lot of the Constitution, we would be sitting here and say, not that the Constitution is wrong, but the people and currently our morality and our political will for wickedness or lack of political will for righteousness is actually the problem. It's the spirit. It's neglecting the spirit of the law, because the spirit of the people is absent or compromised.
Yeah, and just quickly, with the Constitution, that spirit I think actually is embodied in the preamble, right? They list we form the United States in order, right, to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, to promote the general welfare, so provide for the common defense, so on and so forth. They're actually listing the spirit before the law.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which from an originalist perspective actually helps a little bit, because you're like, oh, we know exactly what you meant when you said freedom of religion, because the spirit of the law in the context of the nation itself and the ethnos and the religions that were practiced, their religion specifically,
Right.
We know what you meant by that, and so it's not a puzzle.
They were all denominations of our common Lord.
Yeah. And then going back to, like, we talk about third generation, and like what from the outside in, what the law should require of the foreigner and what immigration should look like. But I also think, like, one thing we should emphasize too is when a foreigner came into Israel, there was forced assimilation.
Yes.
Right.
In other words, there was like shame. There was a system of shame to be foreign. That would encourage someone to LARP, if you will, or to get with it. And that's the other side of it. That's the non-legal side. I know Stephen Wolf has talked about this a lot when he defines a Christian nation, that it's not simply the laws, that it's also the ethos of the social norms and mores. And that would be required too. Because we'd be remiss if we were just like, oh, like, let's just make it the third generation. But like, once you're here, you're still good to like hold on to a little. No, like even the first generation, you should already start to LARP. And that's just,
Right.
that's
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Through cultural power, and there's a lot of influence and power that can be exercised apart from legislation, apart from the law, culturally, putting pressure. But then also legally, like with Israel, there was a cultural expectation to assimilate. But there also was like legally, it's like, well, I don't worship God. I'm a Moabite, or I'm an Amorite or whatever, and we don't do the Sabbath. Great, but you're going to do the Sabbath here. You're going to do it here, but I don't worship your God. That's totally fine. In your heart, privately, you can maintain that position. Outwardly, you're going to walk the walk and talk the talk. Or
you are not buying liquor on Sunday.
Or you're going to leave, or you're going to be stoned. You're going to be put, like, there's actual consequences. And I'm not saying that we should stone. I think that firing squads are fine. I mean, what is a bullet but little stones at the end of the day? It's perfectly reasonable. So I'm moderate.
That is like an immigrant comes in and he murders one of the native sons. It's not, all right, you get prison and some conjugal visits and you can continue to reside here. No, you're done. You had a chance to leave your fatherland and come and join this more prosperous nation, and you blew it. You don't get to have descendants way on down the line who continue in the sins of their father, perpetrating violence against those that are the sons of that nation you came to.
Right. Yeah, it's unheard of. All right, let's, have we gone to both of our commercials?
We have not.
Okay, let's go to our last commercial break of the day, then we're going to come back. And did you have any more videos you were going to play?
We don't have more videos, just some concluding thoughts, and we do have some super chats.
Okay, great. If you guys want to send in some more super chats, we're going to prioritize those. We have a few today, so we probably won't get to any comments or questions outside of the super chats. And then real quick, before we do the commercial, go ahead, if you're watching us on X, could you just repost the video? That helps tremendously with the algorithm. If you want to write something above it, I think that helps even more, like a quote tweet. But if you just want to repost it, that's all you have time for. We appreciate that a lot. That tremendously helps get the message out to more people. And then if you're on YouTube, just make sure to subscribe if you haven't before. And subscribing these days is not quite enough. You will not be notified by the vast majority of the things that we post, unless, in addition to subscribing on YouTube, you also click the bell. So click the bell to be notified when we post, which is 3 live streams a week on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 3 p.m. Central Time. So do us a favor again on X, repost the video, help it get it out. Follow us on X at RightResponseM. At RightResponseM is the handle. Subscribe and click the bell on YouTube. And send in your super chats right now. When we come back, we're going to do maybe 5 minutes of concluding thoughts, and then we're just going to hit super chats. And as soon as we hit the last one, we're going to end the stream and be done for the day. So if you got something that you want to say, if it's a comment or a question, put it as a super chat, even if it's 99 cents, and we'll do our best to get to it. Here's our last commercial break.
America is a country that was founded for the purpose of allowing Christians to do their duty before God and not to have their consciences ruled by the doctrines and commandments of men. Reece Fund exists in order to see the 10 Commandments properly applied, not just as a plaque on the wall, but to actually be used in business as though they're commandments from God that we're supposed to obey. Our goal is to find businesses and to buy them and to build them up. We want to find manufacturing businesses and use them to make sure that we can maintain our capacity to do things here. Reece Fund, Christian capital, boldly deployed.
Running your business with purpose means looking beyond last month's numbers to next year's vision. Kaylee Smith offers CFO-level strategy scaled just for small businesses. At Midstate Accounting, she takes care of your compliance, bookkeeping, and tax returns while providing holistic advisory and fractional CFO services to help you steward your resources with a distinctly Christian perspective. Ready to align your finances with your future? Then call Kaylee Smith at 573-889-7278 for a free, no-obligation consultation. Mention the Right Response podcast to get 10% off your first 3 months. Prefer to explore online? Then you can visit midstateaccounting.net to learn more or schedule a call. Again, that's midstateaccounting.net. With Midstate Accounting, you'll plan for tomorrow while operating in faith today. So call Kaylee Smith at 573-889-7278. Again, that's 573-889-7278. Heaven's Harvest takes pride in providing you with the best freeze-dried emergency survival food kits on the market. Their kits stand out because they prioritize serving sizes and calories that will sustain you for the long haul. No gimmicks, no fillers, just a diverse array of nutritious options that will pleasantly surprise you. But they're more than just emergency food. They're advocates for sustainable preparedness. Their heirloom seed kits include heirloom, non-GMO, non-hybrid, open-pollinated seeds, ensuring that your garden produces the same quality and variety year after year. Packaged in high-grade mylar foil, their seeds have a 10-year shelf life. So get 10% off your Heaven's Harvest order by using our special discount code RRM at checkout or by clicking the link in the description below. Made in the USA and free shipping on orders above $99 for the US only. All right.
To conclude, I wanted to read one thought. Christian political theorists, more specifically, so not necessarily theologians and pastors, but political theorists and political thinkers who were also Christian, especially in Europe in the Middle Ages, they thought about these questions of the foreigner and his relation to the state. And I'm going to read a quote here from Bartholomew Keckerman. He was a 16th century Calvinist German writer, and he said this, and I think it's really helpful, and it sets up, I think, the proper state of the foreigner when he's visiting in another land. Bartholomew Keckerman in System of Political Discipline says this: the foreigner should conduct himself properly towards the citizens of the Republic, observing and in no way harming them, and also towards other foreigners, remembering that he too is a foreigner. Therefore, he should not be curious about the affairs of another republic, should mind his own business, not inquire into others' matters, and should adapt himself to the customs and practices of the place where he lives, as long as they are not completely absurd. If I was, for some reason, to live in Japan, I would be respectful there. I would go in, and I don't think I would ever, I can't imagine moving, but even if I did, I can't imagine running for public office.
Yeah.
This is not my
Why
land.
would you?
This is not where I'm from. I don't belong here in that sense. All we're asking is not something crazy. We're saying, hey, foreigners like that have only been here for a couple decades, maybe one generation. Being American, America, it doesn't mean the same thing to you. And so it's not something about you individually, but as a group, you can't represent America. You haven't lived here for the amount of time my ancestors, your guys' ancestors have lived there. And so there's no hard feelings, but you are a foreigner, and you should be respectful while you're here. You should do no harm to those that are natives of this country. And also, in the realm of politics, sit down and be quiet.
Yeah, mind your business. In other words, our political affairs are not your business.
Nope.
It's not your country. It's not your country. And that doesn't mean that you should be exploited or mistreated, but it also means stay in your lane. Yeah, I think that's well said. Any other concluding thoughts before we do some super chats?
I would just say to that quote too, like what the humility that's sort of described here from on behalf of the foreigner, I think is the most important thing. Like people wonder why everyone's so up in arms about illegal immigration and why you actually do sense a real sort of presence of antipathy toward the immigrant. And I think part of that is the lack of humility. Like there's something about just like the boldness of an immigrant coming in, like we've used the analogy of like your house, just walking in and saying, hey, I'm going to sit here actually, and I'm going to welcome myself to this or that in your home without ever really asking or being especially grateful for it. Naturally, that breeds, I think, particularly within the less spiritually mature population, I think that breeds envy, or not necessarily envy, but antipathy for sure, where it's like, I'm very frustrated that you just walked in here like that. And now I really don't like you.
Yeah.
And maybe it goes so far as to like, I don't like you to an unhealthy extent. And I think there's a danger of that we should be cognizant of. But the reality is that that humility above all things is what needs to be impressed on the foreigner. And like Wes, you're like you describing you going to Japan is like, well, that's what I'm reading is like, I recognize that I don't have a right to anything here. I think you'd mentioned de Tocqueville earlier, coming to America and having that same kind of outside in sort of humble presence and observation of the cultural customs, not particularly a critic of it, but more of just an observant eye over the American spirit.
I'm a guest.
Correct. And I think that's more than anything what's lacking and what's fueling a lot of the sort of conflict.
The prior generation, like individuals that were immigrants or not Americans, I think of especially my dad's generation that they knew, there really was, and maybe will sound like a little bit of a lib for saying it, but there are a lot of people out there that would love nothing more than to come to America, to work hard, many of them Christian, to come to America, to be Christian, to work hard, and to be grateful with what they have. There's a lot of people that are like that. And in a generation where it was rare, those people who did come and did assimilate, and you could obviously tell, like, hey, they're from Sudan or they're from somewhere else, but they love America and they've wanted to make themselves American in everything that they do. I think a lot of us really appreciated them in some way. Yeah. But here's the deal. They were the vast minority. They were the few that actually were willing. They were willing to renounce, for example, dual citizenship. They were willing not to try to bring their family in. They were willing to acquiescence and appropriate everything that was ours. We had a great appreciation for them. Mm-hmm. Muslim socialists that want to come in and be mayor of New York City to increase handouts, that is a whole different ballgame. Yep. And people have to separate, like you said earlier, the micro and the macro. The individual that we all know of people that have come here and they love America and they love its Christian character first and foremost, versus on the whole, billions and billions of people, why do they want to come here? Our stuff.
Yep, that's it. All right, here's some super chats. We've got Evan Davies, $5 or £5 actually from Evan Davies. We appreciate it. Thank you. They said the UK has a 700 strong Islamic group in the Home Office. Halal slaughter is rife. Endless handouts to foreigners. Britain is being judged. Yes, Great Britain is under judgment, and theirs is currently more severe than ours. We could get there. But right now they're ahead of the curve with God's judgment because they're ahead of the curve, I think, in their apostasy. Great Britain has apostatized against their Christian roots longer than we have. And so, so it's worse in England. Yeah, and it's like on that point, I know it's like kind of a joke in America to like kind of tease the UK, but I think in this respect, I'm like, actually, it's very grave to me because it is simply God's grace that they are further into this judgment, but also attack. I would say it's a kind of attack. Yeah. And it's simply because we have an ocean, a 3,000 mile ocean that separates us. Right. That's really all that it can be chalked up to. Yeah, that's a big deal. Okay, JD43 TV, he gave us $5. Thank you, JD. We appreciate it. He said, the Episcopal Church has ended its refugee resettlement agreement with the U.S. to avoid helping resettle South African Israelites. So he's kind of saying like white people would be Israelites, the 10 lost tribes. I see. South African whites instead of Somalis. That is absolutely true. I would disagree with the Israelite part, but absolutely true that the Episcopal Church, and it just shows how much spite and ultimately hatred for Native Americans that the Episcopal Church here has. They had, from my understanding, a decades-long relationship with the U.S. government, helping to settle refugees. And when all of a sudden they were required to help resettle 59, not 59,000. I think it was 49. 49. Okay, so 49 white South African Boers. They were like, who are being genocided on their farms. Right, being genocided by the black population in South Africa. They were like, we can't do it. And they just
we have to draw the line
whole
here.
Thing.
It's gone too far.
Yeah, pretty
That
crazy.
was truly incredible.
And then one of our friends, Manny Hope Rios. Manny's a great guy. He gave us $10. Thanks, Manny. He said, keep fighting the good fight, boys. By God's grace, we will. Amen. That's all the super chats for today. We appreciate you guys tuning in. I hope that you found the episode helpful, and we will see you, Lord willing, on Wednesday. Then I think we're going to try to get a guest on Friday. Yep. All right. We'll see you.